Candy and pranks, haunted houses, fall festivals. What do all of these have in common? Halloween, of course. But what dangers lurk behind those facades of costumed kids and decorated houses?
A lot of times people think that the big hazard that we all get scared about is either, and they're reasonable, that their child will get kidnapped or that their candy will get tampered with. While those could be a risk, the biggest risk is pedestrian injury. And so that's probably one of the more important things to think about as a parent, is to make sure you're supervising your children when they're out, and to know that the risk of pediatric injury actually goes up like 50% during Halloween. And so in a given year, there's about 4.5, I know that's a funny number, about 4.5 deaths from pediatric pedestrian accidents, whereas on any other day of the year it's 2, so that increases. And so that's a significant thing to think about when you're letting your child go out, is to think, are they mature enough? And in general, the advice would be to not let a child under 12 years old trick or treat by themselves. So I would say, and even after that, you have to do it based on the maturity of your child. And also, the other thing to be concerned about is if your child's of driving age. Most of the accidents involved on Halloween with pedestrians are, as the vehicles being driven, are driven by teenagers. So that's another thing to think about.
40% of teenagers stated that they have either been hit or almost hit by a vehicle, mainly because of distraction. Electronic devices, cell phones, games, whatever. They're walking, looking at their electronic devices, and not paying attention. They're distracted. So for teenagers, that's something they need to be thinking about. Especially when they're walking. Just pay attention to what you're doing, not on your electronic device. Younger kids, the main thing with them is you want to make sure that they walk with an adult. 10 and younger, usually they need to be with an adult, and if not, they need to really practice hard on teaching them to make sure they look left, then right, then left again. Make eye contact with any drivers before crossing the street. Cross at an intersection, not in the middle of a block or anything like that. And try to walk with other people and pay attention, especially to cars that are backing up.
The kids are going to go wherever they think people are handing out candy. And it depends on which neighborhood you're in. Some neighborhoods only some of the people do. Some neighborhoods they all seem to. Some neighborhoods, all the lights are turned off, so you just doesn't attract as many kids that way. But if they're on one side of the street getting the candy bar and they see kids on the other side, then they're just probably going to run across the street. We always encourage adult supervision, especially for the younger children that need that. And I think most parents are pretty good about providing that. Children out with their main focus be on what kind of candy they can get, and probably a secondary or maybe not even that high priority focus on their safety in walking out in front of cars, watching where they're going, just stepping in a hole or in a ditch or something like that. So we always encourage them to be safe, encourage parental involvement.
Some years you never have one, then other years you do. They're kind of unpredictable, like fires. You could have the most safety conscious Halloween you've ever seen and nobody have anything, which we always hope for. And then the other times you may have 1 or 2 kids that get hurt or get hit by a car. We've had some kids where they were riding in the hay wagon and carrying a whole bunch of kids down through the neighborhood, and they would snatch the wagon and somebody would fall off and get skinned up. Never had a major thing where somebody was seriously injured, but I've had several scrapes and bruises.
We don't really see too many normally. It's fairly peaceful here, and there's a number of events. There's a big event that the downtown merchants do, the treats and sweets on downtown streets, which is around the old courthouse square. And then of course local churches for a number of years have been hosting things, so that kind of cuts down on any of the mischief, I guess. Most of what we deal with is just kid stuff, harmless pranks, not too much of that. the thing we're concerned mostly about is safety, because we have kids out walking on the streets after dark in some of the neighborhoods. So we're real concerned about pedestrian safety. We want all the drivers that are out in the neighborhoods to keep their speed slow and keep their attention on the road, not distracted by cell phones or other things that might be in the car. So we want them to pay real close attention and observe the speed limit, because that's it gives us the best chance of nobody getting hurt with the extra people out walking the roads.
Occasionally I'll have injuries, like a child fell down and they scraped their knee. I think I've had a laceration before that we've had to sew up or glue back together. But really, and after that, usually the most common thing is some stomach upset, some diarrhea from eating too much candy, or a little tummy ache. That's usually the most common thing I've seen. There's not a huge influx, but there are some that are specifically related to Halloween. So I may have the day after Halloween 3 or 4 visits that were related to Halloween. And even that, like on that night, if I'm working at after hours, some people will come in, specifically for things related to Halloween. But other than that, not that huge of an increase. Okay. One thing people get worried about with Halloween is people tampering with their kids' candy. And while the chances of that are really, really rare, and they hardly ever occur, probably another common sense thing to think is to only go to people's houses that you either know or in neighborhoods where you would trust that your child will be safe to trick or treat. This sounds like common sense, but sometimes you just need to say it so people hear it.
If somebody takes something and gets an item and it looks strange, bring it home. Don't eat it. Bring it home, show it to your parents, tell them where you got it from. I don't know of it happening around here, where people would put razor blades in fruit and things like that, so I would hope that the people around here wouldn't do things like that, but every year you hear of things like that.
Every Halloween, for as long as I can remember, especially as the social media stuff has gotten more prevalent, you'll get these kind of scare alerts that come out, where like there'll be razor blades in the candy apples, or tainted candy or poison candy or stuff like that. I can tell you that fortunately we have no validation of that locally. Okay. But nonetheless, you'll get these things that this just came out, we need to alert you to it, that if you're traveling down the road and somebody's got their bright lights on, don't flash bright lights, because then, they'll retaliate because it's a gang thing or whatever. Just these things make the rounds and rounds and rounds. I would always encourage people, when they read something like that, to take it with a grain of salt. And then the very next thing they should do is go to the internet, to Snopes.com, SNOPES, which is an urban legend website that tracks all these mostly false things that are going around. But if it's true, they'll tell you it's true as well. But they track the history of it, when it first surfaced, the research that they've acquired that either verifies it or debunks it. So if it's one of those things that seems like, go to Snopes.com and check it out. Well, I think all of us that have had email, you don't have to have anything else, just email, has had an email forwarded to you at some point that has one of these stories in it. And of course now with some other social media, you can just shotgun it out to, you put it on your page and then everybody's got it, that's your friend. So that it goes viral in a hurry, so to speak. And then we get a lot of calls about it. 911 gets a lot of calls, all the other agencies get a lot of calls. Is this true? Do I need to keep my kids home? All that. And so if you take just a minute before, if my advice before anybody was to post something like that or pass it on, if they'd check it themselves and say, okay, that sounds bogus, I'm not going to pass it on. I know everybody's concerned about making sure people are informed, but if you take a minute to make sure you're informed first, that's a good thing.
So what should you do if you suspect foul play?
we've got a good law enforcement here, and I'm sure that if you call 911 and told them something was going on in such a neighborhood, they'll be there in just a minute. And as an adult, and if you see something going on, or you see where somebody's hurting some animal, you know, there's been cases known where people want to pick on cats at night. Somebody does something and hurts some animal or something, of course, call 911, let them know. We'll send a deputy over and check it out and see what's going on.
Well, obviously, the first thing they should do is call 911. If they feel like they can render assistance or stand by without endangering themselves, then that would certainly be appreciated. We'll be there within a minute or two. But having a responsible adult, or even maybe someone that's not quite an adult but that recognizes the danger, to, you know, step in and call us and alert us, because really the best thing is for us to know about it, because we'll have somebody there in a hurry, especially if we think it's somebody that's endangered. We'll be coming with all our lights and siren on and all that, just to make sure we get there in a hurry. But you know, observe. If you don't feel comfortable actually stepping into whatever it's going on, if you can at least maintain contact from a distance, so that when we do get there, you can say, okay, well, they turned right at the next street, or something like that. You know, that gives us a way to focus in on the event and where it may be happening.
It is a fun day, and candy is the big part of it. And so I do think they should be allowed to eat some of their candy. They need to brush their teeth afterwards, but everything in moderation, just like anything in life. It's no binge eating of the candy. Probably set a limit, and maybe even go ahead and talk about that beforehand. Say, hey, we're going to get some candy. Mommy's going to tell you how much you can eat. And you know, when night comes and they get all their candy together, you look at it and you say, okay, remember we agreed that you're going to eat 4 to 5 pieces or something, you know, something like that. And then set the rest aside and just know you're going to kind of work on it over the next month of eating their Halloween candy. The amount of candy a child eats probably depends a little bit on the candy itself. So, you know, obviously if it's like the Snickers bars, if they ate 4 of those, it's a lot more calories than, let's say, a couple of little sweet tart packets. So probably you're going to have to use a little bit of common sense there to determine that. I would think 4 to 5 pieces of candy would certainly not be too ridiculous of amount of it for a child to eat. So somewhere around that as your average would be a good goal at any one sitting, because they're probably going to eat as they go along from house to house. So here and there, that's okay. But then when you get back home or you get back in the car, just kind of go ahead and say, all right, let's pull out the candy you're going to eat, pick out what you want, and that's all we're going to eat for the rest of the night, and we'll save some for tomorrow. Most times when a child is having any tummy upset from eating their Halloween candy, most of that can be taken care of at home. The times I would probably bring them in is if they're having vomiting or diarrhea that becomes protracted, and if you're worried that they may be getting dehydrated because they've had enough of it. And so that would be the main time I'd come in for that. Now it is possible, and it's kind of common that Halloween, it's the time of the year when things are getting cold. Kids are starting to get colds and they can spread those. And so you can see that sickness kind of stuff increase around Halloween time. And so therefore, if they started running a fever greater than 101, and they started having trouble keeping fluids down, those would be other reasons I would go ahead and come on in and get them seen about. They may have picked up an illness while they were trick-or-treating.
Have you learned something? Are you trembling in trepidation? Alas, no need to worry. We've got some helpful tips on the way.
If it's on a cold night, a lot of people will build a fire in the yard. If you're dressing up for Halloween, you certainly want to use a non-combustible and preferably one that's got some type of reflective material on it where you can, headlights will show it up. When they're young, you certainly want to carry them to people that know the kids and know who they are, and you'd feel more at ease about what people give them to eat and the candy and that kind of stuff, you know. I know that I was told when I was young, don't go into neighborhoods you don't know these people, you know, but we did it anyway. So, you know, kids are going to be kids. Hopefully they got a little leadership now, you know, people stay with their kids and take them out trick-or-treating and stay with them the whole time. That'd be the ideal situation. If you're carrying a whole group of kids, take a head count every few minutes, make sure you got everybody. When you got a trailer and you load it down with kids and parents get off and go with them and walk to the doors or walk part way with them and let them go up and do their little trick-or-treating, and whenever they come back, make sure that you got everybody and don't leave anybody. Make sure they got some kind of reflective where people won't run over them, because they're going to be working out of the streets and off of trailers and walking, and you certainly want to have something reflective on that would show off in a headlight. Just be on your best behavior when you're driving. Don't get upset with the kids because they get in the street, and be very, very careful around them. If you see a group up ahead, your best bet is to stop and let them go by. I understand, I see people get upset and get road rage over the fact that these kids are out here trick-or-treating, and it's a fact of life. They're going to do this thing, and you've got to be on your best behavior as an adult and try to act like an adult, and let the kids safely come by and let them do their thing. It's not going to hurt you to wait a minute.
Making sure that you're with them if they're of an age where they need to be escorted, making sure that you know where they're at, making sure that whatever costumes they have on are visible. You know, they have some reflective areas on them, so that, because it usually ends up being a daylight and then dusk and then dark event because of the time of year it is. So making sure that they're visible, and then make sure also that any costumes they have do not restrict their vision, so that they're able to have a full view of everything that's going on, so that they know what hazards are around them. And a little safety briefing doesn't hurt either. You know, if you're going to let them venture out with a group without the adults, and tell them what the rules are and give them a time to be back, and, you know, give them that, you know, this is a fun thing. This is not about mischief, so don't make me hear from the police that you've been doing something that you weren't supposed to do. Sticking to the hours is a big one, but paying attention to your surroundings, safety in numbers, stay in a group. I would never, you know, advocate just one person setting out on their own. Fortunately, Halloween's usually kind of a group activity, so that lends itself to that. But you know, in days past, like when I was a kid growing up, we went around the neighborhood, nobody was worried about anything. Well, that's not exactly the world we live in anymore. So safety in numbers is a big deal. Adult supervision, you know, until well past the age when the parents are happy with them being out on their own. I don't know that I need to recommend an age, but parents should have a good sense of that.
So it's based on maturity?
And based on maturity, and based on the group they're going to be with as well. And but I always think, you know, for anybody that's at least under a teenager, adult supervision is not a bad thing. And, you know, going to one of these organized events, of course, takes a lot of the safety concerns out of it. For instance, we're involved from the police department in setting up the perimeter for the event that's downtown. So we'll have street closures so that there's no possibility of traffic coming through and, you know, hitting a little excited 6-year-old that's running to the costume contest or going to get, you know, the pumpkin candy or whatever happens to be the thing that's attracting them, you know. So that's a contained event where there's no possibility of traffic, and it's monitored and supervised, and people have a good time. Similar things happen at the churches as well, because they're usually in the parking lot on the grounds in their building of some kind, so there's a lot less chance for any random event happening.
The number one advice I'd give to parents is to be with your child, to supervise your child, to think of things like, is their costume, is it going to reflect in the night, like is it going to reflect lights on a car and stuff so that your child can be seen. And So if you're observing your child, make sure you're paying attention to them, especially when you're near the road, to be near them. But to also think about when you're choosing their costume, to try not to do just full-on black or the dark, brown, gray, dark colors that are going to be difficult for anyone to see, because the pedestrian injury is the most likely, or the most harmful injury they could get. For children, it's probably a good idea before you go out to go over the rules of walking in streets. To talk about crossing the road, looking both ways, to make sure you're paying attention. For older children who are going out with friends, to talk about how dangerous it is to when you're riding in the car with your friends, that they need to make sure the driver's not texting on their cell phone, they're not being too loud, they're not distracting the driver, that everyone's kind of looking out for what's going on around them. Nothing would ruin your Halloween experience more than being in a car accident and involving another child. So it's good to just talk about that before you let them leave the house, and go over just some general common sense safety things that you get kind of caught up in the fun of Halloween, and you rush to take one small child out to trick or treat while you let your older kids go out to be with their friends, which they may have earned and they may have the common sense to do that, but you need to talk about it before they go. Just some common sense things: traffic safety, being considerate of others, and another good thing to think about actually is the safest times to trick-or-treat. The high times to trick-or-treat are going to be 5 to 9 p.m. If you're trick-or-treating when it's lighter outside, that's going to be a safer time to do it. Now, the heavier flow of traffic is going to usually be between 6 and 7. That's going to be the light time, so that's when you need to be very careful in the car too. But it is generally going to be a safer time to trick-or-treat because you can still see the sun's not down yet.
I haven't seen any specifically in a few years. We have had a couple near misses. I've seen a couple of near misses with some children at Halloween time, just walking, But also, it's not just the pedestrian's, responsibility. The drivers need to, pay attention as well. There are a lot of children out there, participating in trick-or-treating activities and that kind of stuff. So the drivers need to be aware, drive more slow, and the pedestrians need to be aware. And the adults need to pay attention to their children, teach their children proper pedestrian safety, like I just, stated. And the teenagers, look, pay attention, don't be distracted, and look after one another when you're out there on the streets. And, for Halloween, one thing that parents can do is make sure their children are dressed in bright colors. Of course, if they have a costume that may be darker in nature, have them wear reflective items. And carry reflective bags, reflectors on their clothes, that kind of thing. That'll also help them be seen at night on Halloween. Actually, Safe Kids has some reflectors. I have a few for you. We got reflective bags. They reflect the light off of vehicles. And then we also have some of these different type reflectors. And these can be used on Halloween, on the children's book bags, whatever. It's not just for Halloween. But Safe Kids have some. We actually received a grant from FedEx and Clifford Takes a Walk. It's about pedestrian safety. And we received the grant, and we were able to purchase these bags and these different reflectors, that can go on their costumes or on their book bags, whatever, to be seen. But Safe Kids has a few of these. We give away several of them this past weekend. We're going to be giving the rest of them away at different events throughout the month. But you can go to any store and buy some type of reflector. You can even get reflective tape, whatever can be purchased, for putting on their clothing, that kind of stuff. As a parent, I'm a parent of a young child and 2 older children. Main thing is pay attention to your children. Don't let them go out there alone. Send them with a responsible adult or responsible children, older children, teenagers, whatever. And like I said, educate your children before they go out, where to cross the street at, that they need to be seen, take the sidewalks if all possible, that kind of stuff. Stay in a group, always be aware of your surroundings. And the main thing is to pay attention. Don't be distracted by whatever, whether it's electronic devices or other children. Don't just dart out in the middle of the road. Pay attention before crossing the street anytime.
Kids will do things when they are as a group sometimes that they wouldn't do if the parents are there with them. So not being very protective if you let them go by themselves and not have any kind of leadership with them.
We're doing it on Saturday, the 31st. We want everybody to have a good, safe, fun time, and call us if you need us, and we'll be out in force, of course, just to help make sure that everybody's safe.
You have to be extra precautious. There's a million things could go wrong, and it doesn't take but one little slip up. So be on your best behavior when you're driving, be on your best behavior whenever you're stopped at the corner and kids are crossing, and be sure, and if you do anything, stop and help them. You hear that, be a good neighbor. That's what it's all about. Try to help each other out during this time.
So now you know how to be safe this Halloween. Now go have fun and make some memories.